Hey guys, what we're going to look at next doesn't have any direct bearing on describing the motion of an object. It's just a notation that can be really helpful to us. And so we're going to take a look at that. It's something that looks like this. You might see this written out on a paper somewhere. V with this little bitty F written beside it. This F, which is written in a smaller font, if you will, and just below the line that everything else would be written on, is called a subscript. And that makes sense if you think about the two parts of that word. Sub means beneath or under, script means writing. So this is writing that is beneath the rest of the writing. So it's in a smaller font and it is set just below the normal line of this. And what these subscripts are, the F in this case is the subscript, they're just a way of modifying certain values so that we can more quickly talk about a subject. Instead of writing out a couple words, I want to be able to describe it by just writing out a couple letters. So what we're going to do now is just learn some of these letters that we're going to use. And first, these are not subscripts, these are just symbols, but they're symbols that you need to know because I'm going to use them as abbreviations for everything else. So there they are. There are 6 of them. This one indicates position. So we will use X as a symbol for position. There are several others that get used occasionally, but in our case we'll focus on using X. Remember that this little sign over that just means that that's a vector. Position requires a direction, so we have that little symbol over there to remind us that that's a vector. D stands for distance. Remember, distance is a scalar. It does not require a direction, so we don't put the little symbol over it. This one, a D with the vector symbol, will be displacement. V will be speed. V with the vector symbol will be velocity, because remember, velocity is just speed with a direction. And A, if I'm more accurate about it, acceleration is a vector as well, even though I'm not going to emphasize the vector nature of it. Acceleration is a vector, and so we would write the symbol that way. So now I have this shorthand. Rather than having to write the word displacement over and over again, I can just write D with the arrow, and we have that taken care of. What we're going to learn next is how to get even more descriptive, and we'll use a situation to look at this. So here's our situation. We have a car, and forgive my lack of drawing abilities, but we have a car, and it's at a stoplight. And the stoplight is red. We need to talk about the car's speed right here. Now, if you're at a stoplight and you are obeying the laws, hopefully you can figure out what the speed of the car must be. The car is traveling at 0 meters per second. Well, the light turns green, and a couple seconds later, the car has moved down the road and now has some speed. We'll say it's gotten up to speeds going 20 meters per second. If I just use the symbol V, I have no way of telling which speed is which. So I need some other symbol to describe this. Well, this is our speed at the very beginning, and this is our speed at the very end. So we introduce these things called subscripts, and we're going to use I for initial and F for final. And remember that subscript is written below the line and a little bit smaller. So now instead of saying just V equals 0 meters per second, this is our initial speed. It's the speed at the beginning of the problem. And so we would say V sub I is equal to 0 meters per second. Now that sub I is how we read that, but it's V with an I subscript. And here, this is our speed at the end, so we would say this is VF, our final velocity. So notice that the subscript really just describes what's going on there in a little bit more detail. You can also use this to name different things. So for instance, let's suppose on the same road I have a car traveling down the road, and next to it I have a giant truck, which I will attempt to draw. Notice I said attempt. Pretend it's a truck. So we have this truck traveling down the road with the car. And the car is traveling at some speed. Let's say the car is traveling at 20 meters per second, and the truck is traveling at 15 meters per second. So what we can do is we can actually take this and use subscripts so that I can tell these apart. Again, if I just use the V for speed, I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about if I just say V equals so-and-so. But if I say V sub C and V sub T, now with a little bit of common sense, that must be the speed of the car. That must be the speed of the truck. So what I can do is I can use these to distinguish which one I'm talking about. And that's really the purpose of these subscripts. They're to give more information about whatever it is we're talking about. So again, the two that we'll most often use, and you do need to memorize these, I stands for initial at the start, F stands for final at the end, and then at other times you'll just see these thrown in however they're needed, and it should be pretty obvious from context. If it's not, that probably means something has gone wrong. So you'll see these as we keep working, and hopefully come to know and love them.